I'm going to go ahead and start the recording, and we're going to get started. Welcome everybody to our special presentation of 7 tips for, here it says engaging the warfighter in online courses. But today it's really not just the warfighter, but learners in general in online courses. So we are really going to be looking at how you can take these tips and apply them in the online environment. And also keep in mind that these tips don't necessarily need to just be online. They can be used in an in-resident classroom as well, or whether you're doing blended learning. With me today, this is going to be a 3-part presentation, and your presenters. I am Monica Garcia. I'm the Online Learning Course Director here in Faculty Development, and I oversee all of our online courses. Some of you have probably even talked to me as the Blackboard SME, I guess you could call me, when you need assistance with some of your online. My coworkers or colleagues, my online learning specialists are Mr. Frank Rosenkrantz and Miss Brittany Hall, who both are the dynamic duo for our EIDL course. So if you have been through the EIDL course, chances are that you have had the pleasure of having them as instructors and really seeing how engagement is demonstrated in that course. So each of us will be taking part and providing you some tips in this presentation today. So this is what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to look at engagement theory. A lot of what we're talking about is based in engagement theory, and we're going to look at what that actually is. What is engagement theory? I know we all love talking about theories and models, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then we are going to take a deep dive into our 7 tips for creating an engaging online classroom. We're going to go over the effective communication practices. We're going to go over timely and useful feedback, how to keep it light, or how I like to say, the mood. Give them the why, explain the gray area, be a cheerleader, and finally looking at troubleshooting. So let's get into it. So engagement theory. Has anyone in here ever heard of engagement theory? Do we have any academics in here that have heard of this? No? Okay. All right. Well, that's okay. To be honest, I hadn't heard much about it until recently. So let me explain a little bit about what engagement theory is. Engagement theory was actually developed by Greg Kearsley and Ben Schneiderman. And they published a paper back in 1998 called Engagement Theory, a framework for technology-based teaching and learning. And this really focuses on engaged learning. And what they look at with this theory is how they can create successful collaborative teams that work on ambitious projects that are meaningful to someone outside the classroom. So essentially, how can they take what they're doing in the classroom and apply it to the real world? Essentially what we do in technical training, right? So this theory really focuses on engaging the learners and making things relevant to them. So there's 3 components that really summarize this theory, and we call them relate, create, and donate. And they imply that learning activities generally occur in a group context, they are project-based, and they have an outside, authentic focus. So let's look at what this model looks like. So our first principle that you see over here on the left is relate. And this really emphasizes your team efforts, and they involve communication, planning, management, and social skills. So where we're really going to relate to that today is how all of the tips that we're talking about can help to facilitate that communication and that collaboration to effectively motivate our students to learn what we're teaching them. Your second principle is create, and this is really what makes learning a creative and purposeful activity. Your students have to define the project or problem domain and focus their efforts on application of ideas to a specific context. So projects that allow them to get hands-on. Then thirdly is create. I'm sorry, I had this a little bit backwards, but that's okay. So donate is the third principle. And this really stresses the value of making useful contribution while outside learning. This is your real world activities or your authentic focus, and it allows your learners to see how what they're doing can be applied to the real world. If you've been through EIDL, this might sound a little bit familiar because we do talk a lot about these elements just in a different context. A lot of times it's related to Merrill's principles. A lot of times you can see it in Gagne. So understanding how these all work together help our students really grow that intrinsic motivation, which encourages them to be engaged in the content and motivates them to really put their all into the course. So again, as I said, we as facilitators can use the tips that we are sharing with you today to help drive each of these principles in your online classroom. So what are these principles? Okay, so our first one is effective communication. Remember, as part of that relate principle, you're really driving communication. So what does that mean? First, when you are any course, so this can be whether it's synchronous or whether it's asynchronous, you always want to set your expectations up front. This lets your students know what is going to be happening and really what they should be expected to do while in the course. So if they know up front that they're going to have to participate, if they know up front that they're going to have to answer questions in the chat, or they're going to have to, give a thumbs up, or if they're even going to have to turn in assignments based on a deadline, you want to give them those up front. This is the first and most important key to online engagement, because if your students know what's expected of them, they're going to be more likely to participate, because oftentimes that motivation, as much as we don't like to say it, is that final grade. So making sure that they know how to achieve that final grade, it will help them to increase that participation and engagement. If we're talking in terms of our synchronous sessions, you want to keep up the pace. You don't want to just constantly be lecturing. You want to ask questions. You want to get them to be involved. You want to make sure that they are fully participating. We call that, that's about our active learning, and that helps us keep it student-centered. So we allow them to be a part of the discussion. I always like to say, learning's not a spectator sport. So we want our students to be participating in the learning process. And we can do that by keeping up our pace, getting them involved, asking them questions, and helping to prompt that discussion. And finally, keep the focus on the learners. So again, this is our student-centered practice. We want them to create a dialogue in the discussion. So here, you're going to see us asking questions, asking you to put in, your chat answers in the chat, asking you possibly to give a thumbs up, because we really want to allow you to be part of that discussion. And a lot of times, especially in your online courses, whether in the asynchronous discussions, this is where you can really find out what your students' motivations are and what their level of understanding is for the content. So by allowing them and giving them opportunities for dialogue, you as an instructor are going to learn a lot, but your students are also going to have a voice in the course. I love this quote by Zig Ziglar, and it says, in many ways, effective communication begins with mutual respect. Communication inspires, encourages others to do their best. How many have you have ever been in a course where you felt that you didn't really have a voice, or that you felt that your instructor kind of talked down to you? You can either put yes in the chat or give me a thumbs up. We see a lot of yeses. I'm going to let it go here a minute, give you some time to answer. And by the large number of yeses and thumbs up, it seems that we have a consensus that we have all had this happen to us when we've been in a course, that we can feel like we don't have a voice. Well, think about that when you go into either developing your courses or facilitating your courses, and provide those opportunities that allow your students to have that communication and allow them to feel respected, and that rather than, you know, and especially in this environment, rather than feeling like they are, you know, lesser than you, allow them to feel like they're on that same level. I know when I'm teaching, you know, especially in the online course, I'll use my first name. You know, a lot of times that's discouraged, but for me, that's something that helps my students feel like they are my peers, and that we are learning together, rather than them feeling like they don't know as much as I do. I always say that learning is bidirectional, and that we are learning collectively. So you want to allow for that mutual respect in the classroom, and that begins with communication and establishing a rapport, so your students do feel comfortable to come to you if they run into issues. So the second tip that we are sharing is timely and useful feedback. I'm going to ask you guys another question. What has your experience been with feedback in online courses? Has it been negative? Have you seen generic feedback? Spotty. I like that word, spotty. Difficult, generic, rare. Delayed, okay. Generic. And with that feedback, how did you feel? When we have generic feedback, or it's less personalized, or it's delayed. Did it make, so Nancy says it made her feel like her work didn't matter, like you wasted your time doing the assignments, like the assignments weren't reviewed. Timely feedback made you feel valued. Absolutely. Because feedback, it helps give us a gauge on how well we're doing. You know, we are able to see that, hey, we're on the right track. It gives you a guideline for where you stand. Are you doing well? Did you hit the mark? Did you not hit the mark? Why did you not hit the mark? So feedback really benefits both the student and the instructor. The reason I say instructor is because when feedback can help the instructor kind of adjust their teaching and learning style to ensure that the shared goals of the course are met. And that's something that we do in our online courses here in EIDL, in AOL, also in our other online course, AISD. We have surveys built into our course because that feedback is a two-way street. So we give feedback to our students that is personalized, and we request feedback back from our students so that we understand where things need to be adjusted. We also, to ensure that instructors are providing enough time and effort into the course, and if not, then they can increase it. So it definitely benefits both. It also stimulates motivation and deeper learning. Based on your comments, I can see that when you had positive feedback, you were more motivated to continue. When you had that lack of feedback or negative feedback, it kind of decreased your motivation. Also, if you provide feedback and maybe something additional that's personalized, it can allow students to modify their behavior during the learning experience. So it can help them to adjust their performance as well. And finally, it shows instructor presence. One of the biggest things that we promote in our courses is what we call social presence. And social presence can be both from the student and the instructor. But here we're really focusing on instructor presence because your instructors should be there. Because I'm going to ask you, how many of you have felt like you were kind of left to the wolves in a course? Like your instructor, you didn't even know if your instructor was in the course or if they were present, if they were even paying attention. You can go ahead and give me a thumbs up or a yes. Yes. I know I did. I had an instructor that would, for any of my threaded discussions, they would they would just give me a grade. I'm like, okay, did I do well? um, did I answer the question correctly? Okay, I got full points. I'm not mad at that, but why did I get full points? What did you like about it that gave me full points? What did I meet in the criteria that gave me full points? You know, was there something that you really liked about what I wrote, or did you kind of just skim it, made sure I had my minimum posts, and that was it? So your instructor presence really demonstrates that the students or the instructors are as invested in the course as the students are. And Sergeant Retzloff says sometimes it feels like a copy and paste feedback. I've felt that too, because if it's not personalized, that instructor could easily have some canned responses that they are copying and pasting into the feedback boxes, and that's about it. You know, at least use the student's name when you respond to them so they feel like you're actually responding to them. I've also had an instructor call me by the wrong name. That was awesome. So pay attention to who you are writing to as well. But it definitely demonstrates a willingness to help your students learn and investment into the learning process. So to continue into our 7 tips, I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Miss Hall, who's going to talk
Hi,
about getting
everyone.
in the mood.
Yes, keep it light, the mood. I'm going to take present.
I gave you presenter rights.
Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are going to talk when it comes to keep it light, the mood. In the online environment, it's really important that you design different types of assignments and activities that are engaging because unlike the face-to-face environment, when you're in the online classroom, those organic sort of moments that happen, they do not happen in the online environment, so you have to design for those engagement exercises and the engagement piece to actually happen. But with Keep It Light, the mood, what we are going to be talking about here is it really falls on the instructor. And a lot of you, you might have a very engaging instructor in the classroom, and you might think that, oh, wow, they'll make a great online instructor, but that's not always the case. It's not easy to, be excited when I'm looking at a computer screen. There's no one in front of me. So this is where we'll talk about how your online instructor can really be energetic and get their classroom engaging. I want you to think back to an instructor that you really liked and just throw in the chat some adjectives that you would describe that your favorite instructor. Personality, exactly. had a good one, I hope. Not a crappy one. Personable is so important. You feel like you're able to talk to them, approachable. Compassionate is very important, especially as an educator. We have to be compassionate. Good one? Good. Okay, good. Caring is good. Enthusiastic, happy to be there. Humor is very important as well. And I'm glad you're all putting these in the chat because this is exactly what you need to be as an online instructor and to really get your students engaged. The first thing is inclusiveness. As for myself, when IDLE, the instructor developer of online learning course starts, from the very beginning of class, I come to students on their level. I don't want to act like I'm better than them or I'm superior or I know more because I don't. Every single IDLE class, I learn something too from my students because we have a wide variety of students that come to us with a huge background. A lot of them, they have their education in education. So you can learn a lot from your students. And I always make sure that they know that we are inclusive and that we are a group and that I'm not separate from them. And I do this is I make sure that during my responses into their introduction posts that I really point out their experiences that they've had, and I encourage them to share those with the class so that we all can learn from their expertise. And all the way out throughout the whole course, it's really important that through your written communication to your students, that it's positive, it's upbeat, and it's encouraging. Even though maybe your class might not have synchronous sessions where you actually talk to your students daily, but you can really portray that positive, upbeat, encouraging personality and behavior through your written communication as well. With the IDLE course, we do have a daily synchronous session where Frank and I get together with the students for about an hour in the mornings just to go over the day's work. This is where you can really create a good environment for your students, and this is where you should really let your personality shine. When everyone's coming on, we play music, and a lot of times the music will spark conversation. This is where conversation starters, they start talking about the songs. One day this week I played coffee music. It was like relaxed jazz. That didn't go over so well because today I played like 60s and 70s rock, and everyone was in the chat saying, oh, I like this music better. So it's a great conversation starter. I also try to find really informative TED Talks. The students love TED Talks. They're short. They're about 10 minutes or so long. And you can play that while students are coming into the classroom. And also, we have a whiteboard function where students can actually draw on pictures. And so that's also fun too. It just gets them active and engaging with you, the other students, and content as well. Also, I really make an effort to really get to know my students, and you can do this during your synchronous sessions as well. Take time to really read the introductions of your students, and then during the synchronous sessions, just start asking questions. What did you do this weekend? Or who likes football? Or anything. Pick out something from the introduction post and just start talking, and they'll start to elaborate. And then you can really start to build that relationship and build a trustworthy community with your class where they will now be feeling more comfortable to open up with one another. And once your students feel comfortable, then they will start to share more, and then the engagement will just really start to happen. You have to have fun, and I'm glad you guys said humor, so you have to put your fun hat on during anytime you are communicating with your students. And I definitely do not take myself too seriously. If I make a mistake, I laugh about it. I make fun of myself. I do not want to intimidate my students. I don't want to give a negative attitude or be too harsh for them. Remember, the main point is have fun, add humor, and there's a lot of free animated graphics, neat photos. I have a really funny one about netiquette. So find just fun things that will just lighten the mood. This is 1 hour is my time to be positive, humorous, but also knowledgeable and helpful to the students. And finally, it's all in your voice. So your voice tells your listeners a lot about how you feel about a subject. If I came on here and just started talking like this and said, this is fun, just keep it light, the mood, you really have to get to know your students and you want to build a fun learning environment. What fun is that? That's no fun. You can tell by my voice. You want to maintain a positive, make sure it's a little high pitched, empathetic voice towards your listeners. And your word choice is very important as well. You want to make sure you use phrases like, I'm happy to help you, or I'll be glad to do that, absolutely, or certainly, and always say you thank you and you're welcome. Those phrases, trust me, go a long way when you already have nervous, shy students. They're unsure of the course, unsure of the learning management system that they are about to use. So you just having a positive, compassionate word choice will really, really help. And from your first hello the whole way through your last goodbye, you really need to make sure that you are energetic and positive because that will bleed into your students and they will feed off of your personality. So next is, so usually we are working with adult learners. We aren't teaching, fifth graders. We are working with adults. So that is a little different animal, so to speak. And usually learning at adulthood, it's usually voluntary. But also adults, we have a lot to juggle as well. We have family, friends, work. We also, want some personal quality time. So sometimes it's more difficult for adults to make room for learning. And this is all about getting our students motivated and motivating adult learners. Adult learners, we all have high expectations. And a lot of you already put into the chat that you want to take a course that is not going to waste your time or your money. You want it to be worthwhile. And how you can relate to your students is all of the adult learners that you will come in contact with, we all have a vast amount of intrinsic knowledge where we all have different types of experiences. We've all been through different things. We have different observations. We think differently. And when you as the instructor can take whatever it is that you want to teach them and you can connect it to what your student already knows, then they will start with the knowledge creation, which equals motivation. If you can directly tie what it is that you are teaching the students to what they need to know, and you know that if you can know exactly why they're here for the course, and you can tie that in, you have them hook, line, and sinker, and they will be motivated to learn and to listen to what it is that you have to talk about and what you have to tell them. So this is really important that you take all of the experiences that your students know and touch on those and then connect those to what you're teaching them. So that's all I have for Give Them the Why, make it relevant, why they need it. I'm going to pass the baton over to Mr. Rosenkrantz.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully everybody can hear me, and thank you, Ms. Hall. That was awesome. What I want to kind of continue with, and you'll see a lot of the stuff that we've already discussed will kind of roll into and relate exactly into what we'll get to next. And what the first thing we want to look at as far as relates to engagement is explaining the gray areas. So when I mean explain the gray areas, if you take a look at the slide, it says write the following in alphabetical order. And you can see that one student kind of, I guess maybe an outside the box thinker, did exactly what the instructions said. They took each word and wrote the word in alphabetical order. So when we say explain the gray areas, a lot of times we make assumptions that as we explain things, as we discuss things, the student just gets it. And then from the instructor perspective, I've seen this where we ask ourselves, why don't they get it? Or why did they do this? Didn't they read the instructions? That's the most common phrase. Didn't they read the instructions? They may have read the instructions, but they may just have misinterpreted the instructions like this student did in this example. So for this next segment, we're going to look closer at explaining those gray areas to try to mitigate and kind of ward off some of those issues that you have, especially in an online environment where you're not physically there next to the student to really kind of show them exactly what we want. So we have to make sure we can properly do that. And the first and foremost thing is clear and concise instruction. Best advice I can give for this: never assume anything. Never assume that the students are just going to get it. Because remember, this is usually their first time around. It's all new to them. We, as instructors, for those who've been instructors for any extended period of time, a lot of times for us, from our perspective, it seems very easy and clear because we've done it over and over and over again from one class to the next to the next. We always have to remember this is their first time seeing it. So we have to really examine, is there anything in our instructions that can be misinterpreted or anything like that. So one good thing to do is identify trends. As you teach your material from one class to the next, you'll start to notice some things. There might be some assignments where you notice the students are always getting tripped up on, or this area, for some reason, they're always having a problem with. And instead of saying, well, it's the student's fault, they're not paying attention or not reading correctly, kind of reflect on the instructions and look at the instructions. Is there anything in the instructions that are leading them down a different path or a different way of doing things? And once you identify those trends and kind of take note of that, what's causing that confusion in the students, then you can maybe work at clarifying or emphasizing those specific points, especially if you have a synchronous session. Like I said, every course doesn't have it, but if you do have a synchronous session, that's a good time to really emphasize certain points in an assignment or instruction. Say, now, just to be clear, make sure this is done or that is done. And then also always let the students provide you some feedback, like, does everybody understand? Are there any questions? And making sure that everything is clear so we can get rid of those gray areas. Providing examples is another great way to do that. A lot of students like to see what the product should look like. It kind of helps them when they're developing their own. We do that in the EIDL course a lot. Well, for those who've had EIDL, if you remember your course alignment tool, we gave you a blank course alignment tool, but we also offered an example of a course alignment tool that is complete. That way the students have a general idea of what the expectations are, how they should be putting together their assignments by actually seeing them and getting those examples. I'm real big on examples because as a student, when I'm a student, I love to see examples. I love to see the finished product in another format, just to kind of help me get the wheels spinning in my head, to kind of, so I know that I'm on the right track. And another good way of providing example is in an online environment are instructional videos. They are invaluable in an online environment where students, and I always relate this to, how many of you have ever used YouTube to help you do anything, whether it's fix something, learn something, put something together? Kind of in the chat box, let me know if you've ever used YouTube for that purpose. You guys ever use YouTube? Okay, great. I see. My computer is messed up. Absolutely. The vacuum, change battery, yes, all the time. So there you have it. There's proof positive that video or instructional videos can help out are effective tools to use in the learning environment. So I can't express that enough. We, as far as the idle course, we have a capstone, and we used to explain the capstone. We used to go through the whole capstone. Click here, now go over here and click this. Then you have to go to this page and make sure you go to that page. And it got very convoluted, very complex. And of course, the students couldn't memorize all that. And we did have a guide to help them, but we decided, you know what? Let's make a video. So myself and Ms. Hall put together an instructional video that showed them step by step, click for click, exactly what the expectations were for the capstone. That way the student could see it, they can review it, they can pause the video, rewind the video. So, and it worked out very well. We remember I talked about noticing those trends. We saw a sharp decline in errors in the capstone because we provided that instruction, again, clarifying any of those gray areas. So that's very good. And lastly, make yourself available, because all this is fine and good and clarifying instructions, but you have to be available for your students, respond to your students when they ask questions about assignments, or I'm not sure how this is done. Once again, and this kind of really goes back to what Ms. Hall was talking about earlier, your attitude and how you approach your students. You know, instead of being like, oh my gosh, what don't you get? I don't understand why you don't get this. Have that attitude of, I'm here to help you, I'm here to assist you, and explain anything you need help with, kind of providing that helping hand, that supportive attitude versus the, oh, here you go with another question again. Because remember, this is all about engagement. And if we approach our students with that negative energy, then they tend to disengage, and that's what we do not want. So those are some of the things we can do to help explain those gray areas and clarify our students and keep them motivated, which kind of takes me to this next area, to being a cheerleader. The social presence, we talked about this to a degree. I'm just going to kind of continue with that. We have to keep our students in the game. In an online course, depending especially on the length and complexity of the course, we as instructors, as facilitators, it is upon us, it is our responsibility to keep the team going, keep the students motivated, keep them actively involved and engaged. And one way is through that continuous interaction, always being involved with that virtual instructor that was mentioned earlier. We also have to be able to observe virtually. Unlike a standard traditional classroom, we're in the class. We look around, we can see body language, we can notice things, and it's easier to notice behavioral changes in our students because we're physically there with them. In an online environment, we have to still be able to do that, but virtually. You know, looking at maybe their assignments, especially discussion questions, trying to gauge their level of understanding and see if there are any behavioral changes by really reading their responses to thread discussions and blogs and other things that are involved in the course. So, and that has to be continuous. There's a term called being a success coach. That's what we have to be, success coaches, there to help our students and have a genuine interest in the progression and success of our students. It was mentioned earlier about instructors not being involved, which really sends the message, I don't care. We have to take the opposite approach. We have to be genuine in our concern and for our students and wanting them to be successful. And that also means providing advice, almost like the counselor role, essentially, when you're doing that. You know, advising them on best practices when it comes to learning or studying or anything we can offer them, which includes offering outside resources. Do we know of any links or information outside the course that could help our students? Are there any subject matter experts that we can point them to in certain areas if they're having any problems? Once again, it's just a continuous presence, continuous interaction. reaching out to students as well. A lot of times students are somewhat apprehensive and resistant to reaching out to the instructors. So instead of asking questions, they'll try to figure it out on their own, then they get confused and frustrated. Part of that virtually observing is noticing those types of behavioral changes in our students. If we notice that their work isn't as good as it used to be, or that they're having problems, don't always wait on the student to come to you. It's no problem reaching out to students. Hey, is everything okay? I noticed, your assignments have been less than stellar, or maybe coming in later than usual, and kind of reach out to them. Once again, that indicates to the students that, well, maybe my instructor really does care about what I'm doing. For those resistant students that are kind of shy about, coming to the students, or sometimes it's just a pride thing. I don't want to feel like I'm weak, or I need the instructor's help. So kind of reach out to those students. Encourage them, praise them. Now, let them know that they're doing well, that feedback that we talked about earlier. Point out their strengths, and provide some sense of purpose for them, and especially when you know that there's some academic challenges, which kind of goes into that last point. They kind of merge together. If you know that, well, the course is hard, so appreciate their effort and praise them for the good work they're doing, and kind of point out that. So then the next question is, well, what if they didn't hit the mark? What if they're way out in left field with what they're doing? How do you mitigate that? Because at the same time, you want to point out to them that they really need to do better, but at the same time, we want to keep them engaged in the course. And that can be a balancing act sometimes. So we don't want to be too critical in our feedback. We want to give honest feedback, but be tactful and professional in your feedback, and also letting them know that you believe in them, and that they can do it, versus, your work is horrible, I don't think you'll ever be able to do this. We have to continuously be encouraging, even if the work is not up to par. We have to mentor them and provide them with the coaching, that success. Remember, we're success coaches, in order to get them where they need to be in the course. Once again, demonstrating that we genuinely care about their progression throughout the course. So acknowledge those challenges. I know it's hard, I know it can be tough, but you can do this, and I'm here for you to assist you in any capacity that I can to ensure that you meet the goals you need to. And lastly, I want to talk about troubleshooting. Now, on the surface, this may seem like, well, wait a minute. How does troubleshooting, the kind of technical issues, how does that connect to engaging? Well, think about it. How many of you have ever experienced a lot of technical issues with a learning management system or online course you've been involved with, where links are always broken, or the organization of the LMS is just hard to understand and complex, and it just is hard to do? Because if you've experienced that, you tend to get frustrated. And that frustration can then equal disengagement from the course, because you start not to care, get unmotivated, and you're not as engaging as you should be, because you're frustrated by all the issues within the course itself. So the one overall thing, the number one thing, be proactive. Be proactive, be proactive. Think about first some of the common issues. The biggest one generally is connectivity. I already got kicked out of this webinar once or twice already, and had to come back in. So that's always an issue. And also, these will happen to you. Eventually, something will go wrong, and it's not that so much as it goes wrong, it's your reaction to it. That is what counts. Logging on, hardware, software, uploading attachments. We've had students say, I don't know how to do this, or every time I upload this, it doesn't work, and then they get frustrated. So these things will happen, The biggest thing is, what do we do about it? And first and foremost, don't get frustrated. Don't let your own frustration show in a course. For instance, like I said, I got kicked out already in this webinar, but I didn't freak out and like, oh my gosh, I quit, I'm going home. No, I just remain calm, just log back in again. All is good. If something cuts out right now, I would just do the same thing. So have those contingencies. Kind of be familiar with the architecture of your course, the mechanics, how things work, so you can solve some of those simple problems and have some alternatives that you can use. The contingencies are nothing more than backup plans. I call them the what ifs. So before you even start teaching an online course, it's a good thing, just make a list of what ifs. What if this was happen? What if this would happen? And then next to it, kind of create two columns, a what if column and a what to do about it column. So you can, again, remember I mentioned be proactive. So you can pre-plan ahead, what you can do. In our idle course, we also have synchronous sessions. Sometimes students lose audio or they lose connectivity. So what do we do about it? We have something called a Meet Me line. That way they can call in, they can log onto the course on their laptop and be on the phone and listen to everything we say. That's just a backup plan. That's a contingency. A what if this happens? We had an issue not too long ago with the pending hurricane that was coming at us, and we were in the middle of the class. We again had to figure out a what if. Well, what if this hurricane comes, and what are we going to do if we have to shelter or whatever? And we created an announcement and just explained to our students, if this were to happen, these are the plans. This is what we plan on doing. So kind of in your, create those backup plans. That can help a lot in reducing tensions and frustrations due to the technical difficulties you might find yourself in. And again, like, understand how to, you don't have to be a computer guru especially, but know the basics, know how to fix a broken link or how to fix an issue if a student has a problem logging on. So anything like that, just know the basics usually can go a long way with that. I mentioned before the backup plan. If a student can't load something on the computer, well, think about it. Let's say a student has a Word document that they're supposed to load in the course and they can't for some reason. They just can't do it. Off the top of your head, what would you tell that student? How could you get that Word document if they can't load it on the course, on the LMS? There it is. See how simple that was? Very good, Annalise. Lisa, email it. And we've done that. I can't do this. Well, just shoot me an email, attach it, we'll grade it from there. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Very good. And lastly, preventative maintenance, ops check. Ops check everything. Generally a week before the course starts, I like to go through the course, check all the links, make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. And even after you do all that, sometimes things happen. But once again, the biggest thing is we want to mitigate those issues as much as possible. So by checking links, making sure all the assignments are where they're supposed to be in the right order, that can mitigate a lot of problems ahead of time. So the whole point is you can't eliminate technical issues, but you can manage technical issues and mitigate some of those things. So with that, I will turn it back over to Ms. Garcia to kind of close this out for us. Thank you.
Okay, and I was on mute. Sorry about that. Okay, thank you, Frank and Brittany. Fantastic tips and tricks that you've shared, especially from your experiences with the idle course. So as we are closing this out, I want to kind of open the floor. We have about 10 minutes left in our time time before we are done. So let's open the floor. If you have questions or if you've experienced any kind of specific situations or you want to provide some tips and tricks, let's go ahead and throw these questions in the chat. We're going to go ahead and use this time as kind of a question and answer session that maybe we can kind of help you solve some of the issues you've come up against. If you don't have questions, that's okay. We can just be done early. No questions. Okay, that's okay. If you think of one as I'm kind of closing. Oh, so Stuart has a suggestion. He says maximize the chat window when only speaking to other people. Okay, so Andrea has a question. She says, we talked about keeping it light in the classroom. How do we set boundaries as far as personal, professional, etc.? That is a great question, especially for those of you who are teaching your upgrade courses or you want to make sure that you keep a professional setting with maybe your students who are in your initial skills courses. You really want to make sure that you set the standards, but you also maybe you ensure that they're using rank. Maybe that's a setting that you want to make sure where rather than using your first name, you ensure that they call you by your rank and your last name, or if they're a civilian, Mr. or Ms. But so that will help keep that professionalism. Also, as Joe says, you want to make sure that you're setting those standards up front. That's why that communication as far as what is a go or no-go in the classroom is so important. So that way they know what their boundaries are and what they can and can't do. At the same time, you still want to create an environment where they feel comfortable voicing their opinions. Also make sure that, if you don't want swearing, you want to, that everyone is respectful. There's a mutual respect in the classroom, even if there's disagreement. So you can keep it light, but also still set those boundaries by setting those expectations. I hope I answered your question there. Yes. Oh, Brittany, great point. So Brittany says, have a netiquette guide. In all of our online courses, we have this. We have a netiquette guide that outlines what we expect, what the rules of engagement are, especially in your discussions. We even talk about, for instructors, how to mitigate that unwanted behavior in the online environment. Because sometimes if you do end up having a student who's going to be disrespectful, that's where you're going to go direct to the source, and you may just need to nip it in the bud. As Nancy says, students tend to mimic their instructors. So if you are professional and respectful, the students will follow. And that's exactly right. As facilitators, Frank mentions giving examples. As instructors, we are our own example. And so we can model the behavior or the actions that we want our students to do. So if you are having a discussion or you want students to answer discussions a certain way, then that's a great time for you to provide a response to some of your students in your discussion threads, and then you can model the format that you want your students to emulate. Have any other questions or suggestions? Yeah, we can send that out. Also, for everyone that has registered, we have a quick little kind of handy guide that we're going to be sending out to you all. It's kind of just a little crib sheet that has each of our tips on it. So we can send out the netiquette guide in addition to that. Also, if you go through IDLE, we provide that as well. So here you'll see on our last slide, we have our two courses, the Instructor Developer of Online Learning, which of course our dynamic duo, Frank and Brittany, which they have their own name. What'd you call yourselves? I can't remember. It had me rolling this morning. They're kind of like the Brangelina of faculty development. So they are your fabulous instructors for the EIDL course. And they really do model a lot of what we talked about here. Also in Rose and Hall. There we go. I like it. So they really, you'll get a lot of these tools that we're talking about, like a Netiquette guide, your course alignment tool, some really great links where there's some resources that you can reference later. So if you're just starting out and trying to transition your course to the online environment, or if you are just getting started in facilitation, that is a great course for you to take. It'll essentially give you the foundation and fundamentals for online course development and instruction. Our other course is the Analysis of Learning. This is a 4-week, 40-hour course that I am the instructor for, and it's fully asynchronous and modeled at like it would be if you were taking a college course. So you have deadlines throughout the week, but it is a really good course for your for those people who are making the decisions when you're trying to determine what's the best method of delivery for your selected course. We also have our AISD, or Applications of Instructional Design, which is your basic foundation into ISD, and a lot of the tools and facilitation methods that you've seen here are also implemented in that course. If you have further questions, the phone number on here, I love how they refer it to me. That's my phone number, so you can contact us there. Also, this is our scheduling email, the 81trss.tsf3. So if you're interested in taking EIDL or AOL or any of our online courses, if you email that, if you send an email to that inbox, one of our instructor supervisors will get you set up. And we are also located here at Keesler in Alley Hall. So if you are located at Keesler and you want to kind of chat about some things that you have going on in your course and you want some assistance, kind of run some ideas, we are always willing to sit down and talk with you and see what you've got going on. So that is all that we have for you today. I am super excited for this presentation. Oh, Sarah has a question. It says, how can we view recordings of these types of events? Great question. So I will tell you that we have a YouTube channel that we post all of our recordings. We also have a Vimeo channel where all of the recordings are uploaded. So when I send out the recording link, I will send out the link to both of our channels so that you can view our recordings anytime that you want. Oh, yay. So you just found it. Oh, we also have a website. So if you want to know what our upcoming events are, please go to our faculty development website, which is off of the Keesler Air Force Base website under units. And all of our professional development events and our YouTube channel are also in there. Thank you, Sarah, for posting the link. Sarah just posted the link to our website in the chat. So if there are no other questions, that is all I have for you today, and we hope to see you next month. Next month, our session will be on investigating authoring tools, so we hope to see you there. Have a great Wednesday, y'all. Thank you. Bye.